Let not your heart be troubled. You are listening to the Sean Hannity Radio Show podcast. If you're like me and suffer from insomnia, you know what? That's not fun. I tried everything. I couldn't get a good night's sleep. And this is neither drug nor alcohol induced. That's right. It is My Pillow. Mike Lindell invented it, and he fitted me for my first My Pillow, and it's changed my life. I fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer, and the good news, you can too. Just go to mypillow.com, promo code Sean, and take advantage of one of Mike Lindell's best offers, his special 4-pack. You get 50% off 2 My Pillow premium pillows, 2 Go Anywhere pillows. Now, My Pillow's made in the USA, has a 60-day unconditional money-back guarantee, no risk to you, and a 10-year warranty. You don't want to spend more sleepless nights on a pillow tossing and turning that's not working for you. Just go to mypillow.com right now, use the promo code Sean, and you get Mike Lindell's special 4-pack. You get 2 My Pillow premium pillows, 2 Go Anywhere pillows, 50% off, and you'll start getting the kind of peaceful and restful and comfortable and deep healing and recuperative sleep you've been craving and deserve. MyPillow.com, promo code Sean. All right, here we are, 54 days to the single biggest, most important midterm in our lifetime. We're following very closely Hurricane Florence today. Let not your heart be troubled. Most people, thankfully, according to most reports, are heeding the warnings and getting away from the coastal areas. This is the real deal. You're going to have winds surging 130 miles an hour. You're going to have a storm surge. And we expect that once it hits around Wilmington, North Carolina, and Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, that it is going to slow down dramatically, dropping massive amounts of rain on top of the flooding, and then slowly move south towards Charleston. They have now called for Charleston to be evacuated as well. Add that to the list. Maybe go a little more south. Then it's going to go up the East Coast eventually. And unfortunately, this is going to be, we expect billions of dollars in damage, billions of dollars in property gone. It's going to be tough. We've gotten so bad that even storms are now politicized. And it's kind of hard to believe, but it's true. I mean, the Washington Post decided they didn't even want to wait. I'm watching some of the coverage and people saying the response is horrible. I'm like, what are you talking about? The storm hasn't even hit. And I made calls to different contacts, sources that I have, the White House and elsewhere, and I asked very specific questions. I got the directors and I got secretaries on the phone, meaning secretary of blah, 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 that's involved in this. I don't want to give their names out and give all my sources away. And I'm like, are you prepared for this hurricane? Yes. Have you pre-positioned the things that we know are going to be needed? Yes. Food, water, medicine, baby formula, supplies, blankets, cots, pillows, etc. And the answer is yes. Has the president been in contact with the governors and the mayors? Yes. Now, at this point, there's not much anybody can do. You just got to hope that people listen to local authorities and they make their way, away from the hurricane, and hope that the damage gets mitigated in some way, that, in fact, it dropped to a Cat 2, but you're still talking about, especially with wind surges and wind gusts, it's going to be, very dangerous. We expect that by the time this hits, you're going to have flooding and tide surges and a ton of rain, because it's going to literally stop and just keep dumping rain for about a 24-hour period is the last forecast that I heard from. And even during a hurricane, you can't stop people from blaming Donald Trump. And I'm not making it up. I said, how many times, if Donald Trump cured cancer, there'd still be people that hated him. If he gave $10 million to every American, they'd say, why isn't it 11? And there's nothing this man can do that is right in their minds. Washington Post, so they didn't even wait for the hurricane to cause any death, no destruction along the mid-Atlantic coast, and they're already blaming the president for causing the hurricane. Well, if Donald Trump can cause a hurricane, I'd like to know how he did it, because that would be a miracle in and of itself. Next, I guess he's going to allow people to walk on water. But these are the kind of hysterical nut jobs, that run our so-called major news outlets in this country. And it's not just the Washington Post, then CNN picks up on it. Then it becomes a big segment for them. And I guess this is just how their minds work. The editorial board of the Washington Post actually declared, and I know you may think I'm making it up, I'm not. that President Trump is complicit for Hurricane Florence because of his views on climate change. The massive storm doesn't make landfall. The Post publishes a column. It's headlined yesterday, "Another hurricane is about to batter our coast. Trump is complicit." And it goes on to say, when it comes to extreme weather, Mr. Trump is complicit. He plays down humans' role in increasing the risks and continues to dismantle efforts to address those risks. It's hard to attribute any single weather event to climate change, but there's no reasonable doubt that humans are priming the Earth's systems to produce disasters, according to the editorial board. Then they go on to quote some climate researcher who says previous hurricanes would not have produced so much rain without human-induced climate change, and Florence is another indication of global warming. I just want to remind you that many of these same people back in the 70s, like Time magazine, was warning of the coming ice age in one of their famous covers. Then it became global warming. And then all of a sudden there was a couple of years in there where the earth wasn't warming, it was cooling. Then they said climate change. So it basically means that if it's cold, if it's hot, if it rains, if it snows, if it doesn't rain or snow, that they can always say the same climate change under one big banner. I know there's conflicting views on it, although the left would like to say this is resolved science. This is science. It's 100%. Why did they have to alter? And where was that scandal in England with all the science data that they altered about the issue of climate change? Why did they have to alter it? The information was so overwhelming, then they wouldn't have had to worry about doing something like that. But you got a lot of hate out there, and we're 54 days out of an election, and this becomes beyond the silly season. If you live in North Carolina, South Carolina, don't focus on the politics. I focus on the safety of yourself and your family. If you haven't left, you still have time. And I'd start thinking about getting out really soon. Maybe go in your house, get your car, load it up, gas it up, and head inland to safer ground. And there are shelters, I'm sure that's all over the radio dial where you need to go. And first and foremost, we want to keep you safe. And as annoying and as difficult as it can be, if there's major damage to your house or your house is destroyed, as long as you get away with your life, that's the most important thing. And there are groups like Samaritan Purse and the Red Cross. And, yeah, your federal government will be there with disaster aid money to help rebuild like we always are. That's the type of people we are. But you see a lot of this unhinged mentality. Well, we actually got a tape. They started arguing about the Washington Post article. This is supposed to be news. This is supposed to be a news channel. Listen to CNN fake news arguing over whether Trump is complicit in helping with create the Hurricane Florence.
A damning Washington Post editorial is calling President Trump, quote, complicit in this storm, not for failing to prepare, but for failing to address climate change. So senior political analyst John Avlon has more for us. What do you see, John?
That's right, Allie. Look, President Trump has been reaching for storm superlatives, as he's wont to do. The biggest, the worst, the most dangerous, and who can forget, tremendously wet. But while President Trump has been talking up our preparedness, his policies have been tearing down our defenses to climate change, which is often blamed for extreme weather. In fact, on the very same day Trump was discussing Florence from the Oval Office, his EPA proposed rolling back restrictions on emissions of methane, which is 25 times worse than carbon dioxide when it comes to climate change. And that's just the latest environmental policy targeted by the Trump administration. According to a July study from the New York Times, nearly 80 regulations could be on their way out. They include everything from no longer requiring chemical companies to report leaks, to cutting cars and trucks' fuel efficiency, pulling the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accords, dismantling the Clean Power Plan, and opening nearly all our coastline to offshore drilling. It's so bad that according to 2 Harvard scientists, Trump's environmental policies could lead to an additional 80,000 unnecessary deaths every decade. Not convinced about the connection between climate change and extreme weather? Well, warmer water means more intense storms. And when President Trump called Hurricane Florence tremendously wet, he was actually onto something. The amount of precipitation in our worst storms increased nearly 20% between 1958 and 2007, according to one scientific study. And the relative number of these extreme storms is also up about 40% in that same period. But you don't need to be a tree hugger to recognize the cost of climate change. Here's a stat that will get the attention of even the most committed capitalist. The total cost of U.S. hurricanes this decade is more than $343 billion. That's with a B. And southern states, the heart of Trump's base, are the ones that have sustained the most damage and will likely face the greatest cost in the future.
All right, enough of this. You get the point here. Now, there are many people that have disagreements in spite of them saying there's no more debate, no more room for debate. We've had many debates with many people that have very different views on all of this. I'm not getting into the merits of whether or not there's a change in temperature or climate change is real. It's not the point. They're trying to say that the president's complicit. It's ridiculous. It's an absurdity. It is Trump derangement syndrome on a level that's almost difficult to comprehend. But this is what they think. They've now convinced themselves that Donald Trump is that powerful and evil that he's complicit with hurricanes. You know, we're getting to see a lot of things happening that ought to alarm a lot of people. Now, if you go back to when Steve Scalise was shot in that ball field and Republicans were practicing for that game that they have against the Democrats, and you got this shooter that was a Bernie supporter. I never blamed Bernie Sanders for the fact that one of his supporters was a nut that would go out there and shoot innocent men, women, and children. I just don't believe in asserting blame that way. I never blamed the Unabomber, was a big earth in the balance Al Gore guy. He had it in his cabin when he was finally caught. I don't blame Al Gore and whatever extreme views Al Gore happens to peddle out there every day. You can't blame individuals. We're watching guys like Cory Booker, Maxine Waters, and others say to get in people's faces and follow these cabinet officials into grocery stores and wherever else they happen to be shopping or restaurants. And we watch what happened with Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi, with Secretary Nielsen, Homeland Security, Sarah Sanders. We've heard the ratcheted up rhetoric against Melania Trump, Ivanka Trump, even 12-year-old Barron Trump. And there's a level of viciousness now that exists out there that I can't remember ever hearing. Some people said horrible things about the Obamas, but not this. I don't remember it, at least certainly. But you have people that, so-called mainstream anchors on mainstream on networks doing this stuff. Well, now it's resulting in a lot of incidences. He had over the weekend a Trump-hating nut job in San Francisco, has been driving around the bend and all his vicious rhetoric that he keeps hearing. Anyway, he attempted to assassinate a Republican congressional candidate with a switchblade. And thankfully, the blade malfunctioned and they were able to stop the guy and catch the guy. You have a Trump-hating professor shooting himself to protest President Trump. Well, that's out in Vegas. The Vegas Review-Journal reported on that. That's a little scary. That's taking hatred of a candidate to a new level. You've got so many instances of threats and reported threats against people just for wearing MAGA hats that show they support Donald Trump. Poor Susan Collins literally has thousands of coat hangers being sent to her house or office, rather, and then also messages sent to her office that are just so vitriolic. Also threats that they're going to withhold money for her campaign if she doesn't vote against Kavanaugh. And if she does vote for Kavanaugh, they're going to give that to her opponent. And it's pretty intimidating at this point. It's a pretty new low that we're hitting here. Collins staffers are saying they're getting vulgar calls about Kavanaugh left and right. I don't think this makes the case. Now, I won't go the step the Democrats will and blame talk radio or blame what somebody says on television or blame what some congressman or senator says. People are responsible for their own conduct. Something happens and somebody happens to have a conservative view. I'm not responsible for their stupidity because I deplore violence. I believe in the free and open exchange of ideas, ideals, and opinions. I believe in elections. Yeah, I sucked it up with 8 years of Obama. Some people are going to have to suck up 8 years of Donald Trump. Just the way the process goes. But there are some that I believe have they're just ticking time bombs, and they listen to the rhetoric of some of these people, and I think it can contribute to setting some of these people off. Although ultimately people are responsible for their own actions.
With only a kite, a house key, and wet hemp string. Benjamin Franklin captured lightning in a bottle. Over 260 years later, with a little resourcefulness, ingenuity, and grit, we're not only capturing energy from the sun and wind, we're storing it, ensuring Americans have the energy they need whenever they need it. Learn more about the nation's leader in energy storage at nexteraenergy.com.
I think Newt Gingrich was right, and we got to nationalize the election. We can talk about all the things the Democrats will do if they get power in 54 days, but that's simple. They want to impeach the president. They're saying it. They want their crumbs back and higher taxes. They're saying it. They want to keep Obamacare. They're saying it. We know where they stand on eliminating ICE, wanting open borders and sanctuary cities and states, et cetera. But if you look at all the economic success that the president has had, we now have median income now at the highest level, real dollars, since 1999. Well, that's the forgotten men and women. That's the middle class. Every election, Republicans are racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic. They want dirty air and water. We breathe the air and we drink the water. We actually want a safe environment. We need to be good stewards of that which God gave us. I agree completely with that. But putting that aside, and then, well, what are Republicans going to stand for here? You want to, Democratic policies don't work. The share of Californians in poverty fell to 19%, 1.4% decrease from last year. However, policy experts are warning that in spite of good news, more than 7 million people still struggle to get by in the state of California. And their governor wannabe, Gavin Newsom, he wants free health care for everybody, regardless of whether you're a citizen of California or the United States or not. How are you going to afford that? But the thing is when you have consumer confidence now at an all-time high, record low unemployment in 14 states, record low unemployment for African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, women in the workplace, youth unemployment at a 55-year low, and you have more manufacturing jobs than we've had in the last 30 years, jobs Obama said weren't coming back. Why would you want to go backwards? So Republicans need to go out and say they want to make the tax cuts permanent. They want to secure the borders. They want to replace Obamacare with more choices, health savings accounts, and health care cooperatives. That's a proactive agenda, not just they're going to do this agenda.
Do you have opinions that you feel you can't express? I think we all do. Are you looking for a place to stir up conversation and let your opinions be heard? I want to introduce you to a new alternative social media site, Snippy.com. Snippy is an unbiased social media platform that's all about conversation and community. Snippy not only encourages freedom of expression, but guarantees its users the ability to discuss topics freely, without any suppression from administrators. Check in for a quick update about current events, or spend hours scrolling through users' posts. Write your thoughts and strike up conversation. Snippy's founders have intentionally created a forum where anyone can feel free to express their thoughts, frustrations, ideas, anything really. It's a place where discussion is valued, a place where your opinion matters, totally free. Go to Snippy.com now to express yourself. No shadow banning, no character limit, and no suppression of conservative thought ever. Check out the website at Snippy.com or download the app. No censorship, no agenda. Join us at Snippy to get the discussion rolling.
All right, 25 till the top of the hour. Hurricane Florence making its way now towards the Carolinas, Wilmington. Even now, if it went anyway, it went a little bit north of where the original projections were, a place like Jacksonville, but also Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. That's going to get hit. Expected now, they have evacuated Charleston, South Carolina, and it has been downgraded from Cat 3 to a Cat 2. And you're still talking about gusts of 125 miles per hour, winds sustained 110 miles per hour. Joe Bastardi is the chief meteorologist of the Sean Hannity Show. He runs weatherbell.com. He has a veritable encyclopedia memory when it comes to hurricanes and the history of hurricanes. Well, you've called it right. You said it wouldn't really alter its course much, and it hasn't. Maybe a little bit north, but it's on its way. When does it land? How bad is it going to be?
Well, first of all, we said Cape Fear. It's going to be a Cape Fear tomorrow at around noon. The question, the battle still remains, Sean, and it's the same thing. Remember the day before Irma when I was talking to you saying I think it's going to try to go down toward Cuba first before it came up, and it took some of the strength out of it? The European-generated computer model, I've seen it do this 4 or 5 times, predict the south jog and beat the U.S. models, and it's being tested again. The latest model takes it to where I was telling you yesterday. It turns southwestward, comes all the way down to Georgetown, maybe even to Charleston, before it goes back. And this is different from what the U.S. model's saying. And, you know, you look at this and you see run after run. And the reason the European may be right is this. The pattern right now is such that to the east and northeast of the hurricane, the big ridge that has been steering it breaks down completely. And there's a trough that develops out east of Bermuda, okay? So you got a dip in the jet stream east of Bermuda. The new ridge develops right over Chicago. Now think about what the stream flow is between the trough, the buckling out over the Atlantic, and the upper high pressure reforming back to the west. It is a southwest component from northeast to southwest. You see what I'm saying? So this hurricane's been in this stream. It's a cork in the stream that's been coming northwest. That all collapses, and it changes to northeast. And that means that by tomorrow at this time, all the steering's collapsed. It may not want to push inland, so the last thing it has to do is drift southwest along the coast. This is very significant, especially for the Grand Strand, because even though the hurricane would be weakening at this time, what would happen is if it gets to the south and then southwest of Myrtle Beach just drifting along, Myrtle Beach gets hammered by 60 to 80, 90 mile an hour east winds for 12 to 18, 24 hours, gets 2 to 3 feet of rain, and enhances the damage in that particular area. If it stays north of Myrtle Beach, it's still a bad storm, but the wind never comes around to the east and southeast from off the ocean there. You see what I'm saying? So it's still a very, very critical forecast situation. You've seen my maps taking the idea that this is going to get to Cape Fear and then try to turn southwestward down along the coast and come back into Georgetown, maybe Charleston, late Saturday and Sunday. So that's the idea.
So why is it going to make? Because that is not the typical pattern that we would normally see.
No.
Normally, it would head northeast, but you're saying that it's going to hit and then sort of begin a southeasterly slow.
Southwest.
I'm sorry, southwesterly.
Down the coast.
Yeah, and moving inward, and then moving inward and moving down south. And then it could get as far south, you're saying, as Charleston. So Charleston really is looking at a real threat also.
Well, yeah, but by that time it'd probably be a 60. The wind would come from the northwest first. So, Charles, I'm not that. Even if the center got down south of Charleston, it's not the same beast. It's going to be tomorrow at Wilmington, Cape Fear, and then Myrtle Beach late tomorrow night on into Saturday. Those areas, but still be a significant storm in Charleston. But in the meantime, think about what we're talking about. It's Thursday. We're talking about Sunday. It's just in South Carolina. This is the kind of thing that's going to dump 3 to 4 feet of rain, I think, in some places, and widespread 1 to 2 feet of rain, all the way down to, including the Grand Strand, right? So you've got all that area along Myrtle Beach and all the way up to Cape Lookout that is going to get an unprecedented storm here. Now, let me talk about categories first. I have a different scale I use as a power and impact scale. And Sean, when we were talking about Sandy, I was talking to you about that, how Sandy on my scale was a major hurricane, right? And it did major damage. What I'm concerned with, how strong is the storm overall? And so the wind at the center of the storm has dropped, no doubt about it, but it has spread out. So what you have, remember with Sandy, you had, the highest winds are 80 to 90 at the center, but you go out 150 miles, there's still 75 to 80. So what's happening is, folks, is you've got all this energy in the wind that's extending 150 miles northeast of this hurricane is just piling water back into the coastline. So not only are you concerned about the storm surge, but with the storm moving so slow, it's a repetitive pounding. Every tide gets higher than the one before. And that is a real problem all the way up through New Bern and all those Pamlico Sound areas that are predicting the 9 to 13-foot storm surges back on Pamlico Sound. So you're looking at a very extensive situation. And when we get down to Myrtle, if the storm does do what I'm forecasting now, and with all due respect, I understand the northerly path and the Hurricane Center, they're great. They may be exactly right. So there is doubt about it. I'm not sitting here saying what I'm saying is etched in stone. We had Cape Fear from 8 days away, but the end game now, The end game now is the most difficult part of this forecast. But if that storm gets to the south and southeast to Myrtle Beach, then their surge becomes much more significant Saturday into Saturday night.
Would you expect a loss of property on a very high scale in these coastal areas?
There's no change in all of that. It may not be that roofs are blown off, but foundations are taking out because of the incessant pounding. I mean, if you're in any of these flood areas, including the rivers, I mean, you got to understand a lot of these rivers.
What about the intercoastal areas? What about that?
Same thing. I mean, you're getting into when you're looking at 15 to 20 inches of rain in these areas. Once you get inland, 50 to 100 miles, right? What are these rivers going to do? What's going to happen if you live in a floodplain? You think, well, what do you call? I got by in Matthew, right? No, this is worse than Matthew. All right, so you've got to you just have to hunker down and get the heck out of there because of the way it is.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you, because I'm reading the Washington Post, and every left-winger on CNN is suggesting that the president is complicit with this formation of this hurricane. You have been involved in weather how long in your life? Your father was a meteorologist, correct? You've been doing this since you're a kid.
He still is a meteorologist, and he's been talking to me on this storm quite often, including suggesting that it could perform a tight little loop tomorrow, which is I've seen storms loop in there. But anyway, okay. Well, let's put it this way: Castro. This is the antics of progressives. Back in 1963, Castro accused the United States of blocking a hurricane over his island, Florida. And what I'm sitting there going, well, if Donald Trump can control the weather, he must be a pretty powerful guy. That's what I used to think when if you were the leader of a country and you were telling your country, the United States could control the weather, I'd be darn afraid of the United States, folks. I wrote the book about it, and Sean knows my book, The Climate Chronicles. It's all, I hate to do a commercial for it, but it's all in there. This is all predictable. You can predict what they're going to do better than you can predict what the weather's going to do. It's called climate ambulance chasing. They wait for something to happen and point a finger at somebody. We all know that nature.
But there is an ebb and flow to the Earth's temperature. We know that. But there's also been the politicizing of it, because if you go back to Time magazine in the 70s, they were hyperventilating that the next ice age is coming. So what are people to believe?
Look, I wrote a love story because what I have loved since I was 3 years old, since my first memory beside my mom and dad, has been dragged through the mud. And I'm 63. If you ever told me when I was a kid this is what it would come down to, that all of a sudden we got people doing this, and it's just amazing.
What you're saying to people aren't understanding you. You're saying you have a love with weather. You've been a hurricane chaser. You've been a storm chaser. You've been a tornado chaser. I mean, this is in your blood. This is what you do every day. You have a knowledge of past storms that go back hundreds of years. You could tell us, if I asked about what the biggest storm in the 1920s and 30s were, you'd be able to answer.
Well, yeah, you had those hurricanes hitting Florida back then, 1930s. Which one do you want to know? 35, 38, 33?
Exactly. What were their names?
The 33 storm that went into Virginia Beach from the south. How did that happen? How did that happen in 1933? That a storm hit.
Well, how
Virginia
old was
Beach?
Donald Trump?
was I don't even know if he was even alive. My point is this: look, the majesty of the weather, the majesty of the atmosphere is in control of the entire situation. And you just have to say to yourself, okay, why hasn't this intensified?
But we still
even
must
more?
be good stewards of the air and water. Nobody wants dirty air and dirty water. And yeah.
Absolutely.
But do you think human activity, which is the argument of those people on the left, do you think human activity is causing dramatic change in the weather? And are we causing more incidents to occur, which is what Al Gore would argue with you?
Well, let's put it this way. If we, in the last 50 years, we've only had 37% of the major hits on the United States that we had the previous 50 years. So if it is causing something, if we want to use that metric, how bad it's getting, it's actually caused a downturn in the last 50 years. How them apples? So, folks, look, it's the sun, the ocean, stochastic events, and the design of the system that trumps what man can do. No pun intended, the president, if he's listening. But the fact of the matter is, that if man is influencing the weather, it's so minute that it's lost in the noise, okay? I can't say for sure that, that this doesn't have some kind of effect someplace in the totality of the situation. I believe the planet is warmer now than it was 30, 40 years ago, but it's natural and cyclical. I also believe that as a forecaster, you have to deal with the fact that the planet is warmer, that there are natural cycles. Nobody denies the climate. Nobody denies it's a bit warmer than it was. As a matter of fact, I actually think it's helping out getting a jump on forecast because the atmosphere in the large term may be a little bit more sensitive. But all this storm stuff, this heat wave stuff, it's all shiny penny chasing. And
is there a period where you would anticipate the planet cools again?
Yeah, well, the planet's been cooling off the El Nino since we had that 2 years ago. That's what I don't understand. If you see an El Nino come along and the temperature spikes, and then after the El Nino goes away and then it goes down, right? But wouldn't you be saying, well, let's see, the ocean stuck more water vapor into the atmosphere.
Then why does every leftist on television, if you ever watch them, why do they always say that the science is in, it's incontrovertible, the debate is over? And yet I don't see, I interview a lot of people on all sides of the debate, and I don't see that this debate is over in any way.
Yeah, let me say something, okay? Folks, if I wanted the number one profit derivative for someone like me would be solar and wind. Why? Because a fossil fuel company needs a seasonal forecast. So does a solar company. So does a wind company. But they need the forecast on the day of the event. It's much more profitable to forecast for someone that needs a forecast every single day. As opposed, for instance, we have our winter forecast out. We're forecasting a cold, snowy winter. All right, so I have my companies all getting all ready for this. It's going to be like it could be like 09.
What did you forecast for last winter?
We had a great forecast. We had a cold, snowy winter, and we had here's what we had: a bookends winter, a fast start.
All right, hang in there, Joe Bastardi. Jimmy is in Virginia. What's up, Jimmy? I only got about a minute for you.
Yes. Hi, Sean.
Yes, sir.
My wife works for FEMA, and she is working her you-know-what off with the storm. All of them are. So it's like Mr. Brown when everybody blamed him for everything that happened with FEMA. That was a lie. It's amazing how people want to blame other people when it's not their fault. FEMA has been doing this for years, and they do the best they can.
Well, look, you have to coordinate. Remember, it all starts in the states and the local governments. And, yeah, the government has, and the federal government's prepositioned a lot of this stuff. It is a fact. You know what I'll do? Maybe I'll bring on one of these climate change lunatics that thinks Donald Trump is, contributing to this, and I'll let you debate. But Joe Bastardi, will have you on tomorrow, and I'm sure a lot of action. And you agree with me, people need to heed their warnings. And if they're in flood areas, in the coastal areas, and they've been told to evacuate, we hope they will. And I know the American people will be there to help them with the damage and the cleanup and everything else as time goes on. You're in our thoughts and prayers. Joe Bastardi, weatherbell.com. Appreciate it. 800-941-SEAN if you want to be a part of the program. Maybe we'll let Bastardi debate the Washington Post over the comments about the president, which are just frankly ridiculous, but whatever. 54 days till Election Day. We have a lot to get to. We'll check in with the governor of North Carolina on how prepared the state is for what looks like a direct hit on them. Also, we'll look at the polls 54 days out. John McLaughlin and Doug Schoen will check in with us today. The state of the media with Joe Concha and their hysteria, all things Trump, and Jonathan Gillum and Danielle McLaughlin. We'll have Hannity tonight at 9. Probably some hurricane coverage, obviously. And we have more struck page text that will release tonight as well. It's all coming up.
What are the Democrats' message right now? Let's raise taxes. Right, that's one of their messages. Let's raise taxes. Let's go after our amazing law enforcement. Let's abolish ICE and let's eliminate plastic straws. I mean, that's literally the message of the Democrats right now. I mean, they have no leadership. Yeah. You saw the disaster that was the Kavanaugh hearings, where you have Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, and everything.
Unhinged.
they're up there grandstanding. I mean, the poor guy didn't even get to speak for the first 7 hours of the hearing because they're sitting there going back and forth, running for president of the United States up, on the stage. I mean, it's crazy. I don't think America's into that. I mean, they all fought against this tax cut, the greatest tax cut in the history of the country that puts so much fuel into our economy and is causing all these unbelievable numbers that we're seeing every single day.
See what the Atlanta Fed just projected?
They all voted against this.
They projected 4.7 GDP for the third quarter.
It's amazing. And by the way, they had to revise GDP upward
to 4.2
this quarter. And do you remember the New York Times and the LA Times? They all made fun of my father during the election. He says he can get above 3% GDP. There's no way he can get above 3% GDP. He's dreaming. Then he gets 4.2% GDP, and they're crickets, right? They're talking about Omarosa. They're talking about some crazy book that comes out this week. I mean, no matter what he does, they won't give him credit, and it's horrible. But you know what? The people of this country...
You're pretty calm about it. I'm not as calm as you.
The people of this country are really smart. They see through nonsense. They see through BS. And
but in 56 days, if they want this to continue...
Sean, he's going to... Yeah, they better go out and vote. By the way, by voting for Republicans, you're helping him succeed at the mission...
that you elected in 2016.
That's right. And if you don't, you're effectively voting against him.
All right, that was Eric Trump on Hannity 2 nights ago. We're now 54 days before the most important midterm election ever. Now, if success mattered, if economic success mattered as much as Obama can't stand that, well, his economy resulted in, the worst recovery since the 40s, the lowest home ownership in 51 years, the lowest labor participation rate since the 70s, 13 million more Americans on food stamps, 8 million more in poverty, taking on more debt than every other president before him combined, and the only president never to meet 3% GDP growth in any single year of his presidency. Well, those were the Obama years. That's the Obama track record. And numbers speak for themselves. No wonder why he wants to say, no, I want to take credit for Trump's years. But he blamed Bush for the economy he inherited for 8 long years. And then you look where we are now. We have consumer confidence now at a record high. We have the labor participation rate, the highest it's been in decades. We have more jobs available than people applying for unemployment insurance. We have 4 million fewer people on food stamps. We have 4 million new jobs created. We have the biggest gain in manufacturing jobs than we've seen in 30 years in the country, jobs that Obama told us were never coming back. We had great news that came in yesterday. The median U.S. household income is now reached a high of $61,372. Making that mark and reaching that number, well, that means that is the first time the middle class in this country has finally earned more than they did in real dollars since 1999. Middle class household income has steadily been rising. So all of the mantra that goes, well, these are tax cuts for the rich, that's not working. President gave his tax cuts, promise made, promise kept. The president got rid of burdensome regulation, promise made, promise kept. The president opened a door with pipelines and ANWR and deregulation. America can now get on a path towards energy independence. The wall is being built. $3+ billion has already been funded. We need the other 25. The president kept his promise on Iran. He kept his promise with North Korea, kept his promise with Israel. Pretty good track record for less than 2 years' work. But the polls show at this moment of time, if the election were held today, not in 54 days, that probably the Democrats have a pretty good chance of getting back the House. Here to analyze what we do going forward and what's going to happen, John McLaughlin. He is the founder of McLaughlin & Associates. Doug Schoen, he's a pollster, author, and Fox News political analyst. Welcome both of you back.
Thanks so much, Sean.
I think
Great to be back.
New was on the program yesterday. He cited actually polling you had, and he said by the end of September, Republicans should come up with 5 specific items, sign their name to a contract-like agreement, and tell the American people they're going to stay with conservative justices, originalists, that they're going to build the wall and keep the country safe, that they're going to make the tax cuts permanent, move towards energy independence, create millions of jobs. It's also good for national security, and I think that's a good idea.
Absolutely, because in that poll, it made, among all voters, and it's up online, we have it on our website, McLaughlinOnline.com, in the August national poll results, 50% of all voters were more likely to vote for a Republican who was running on Donald Trump's contract to make America great again, which would include those types of issues. Now, and it was a majority of the independents. It was really totally stunning and strong that the issues are what reelect people, and there's definitely a disconnect between what the Republicans think in Washington and the people outside the Beltway. But independents, for example, 45-31, they're more likely to vote for a Republican who would support Trump's contract to make America great again. So those kinds of issues would get these people reelected, but they have to do it. One other important thing right now, this is really, really important. All those issues you mentioned, right now, a hurricane is barreling down at the Carolinas. And ever since Katrina, a hurricane has been a presidential responsibility, a severe hurricane. You think about it, when Sandy hit the week before the 2012 election, Obama was losing before the hurricane, and then his efforts to stabilize the Northeast in New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, et cetera, he went ahead after the hurricane. He got back ahead. It reelected him. It was an act of God. The media, the Trump-deranged media, is already attacking the president, saying he didn't handle Puerto Rico well. Well, they're ignoring Texas, they're ignoring Florida, and they're ignoring the severity of the Puerto Rican tragedy. But I'll tell you what. They're already in Trump deranged mode, trying to attack the president as he's cleared his schedule.
No, they're saying he's saying he's complicit. Now, I checked in and I made some calls over to people I know in the White House, and they have told me they're all over it. I talked to Secretary Nielsen. And she just got off the phone with the FEMA director. They have pre-positioned food, water, medicine, supplies, blankets, cots, baby formula. They got it all ready to go.
Right, and by the way, you can't help. I mean, this is a act of God. This is I'm not blaming God, but this is a natural.
Why are you attacking
event.
God on my show? That's really dangerous.
I'm not. You're right. I'm going to.
Yeah, you're going. No, say it. You're going straight to hell. I agree with that.
You're right, but I'll tell you what. The voters and the Americans, the whole country's got their eyes on this right now, and they want to see the country united to help our friends and people that we know in North Carolina, other Americans, to make sure they get through this tragic event that's about to hit. So really, in the very short term, we have to make sure that whatever happens is, we do our best to help them there, and the recovery is as a maximum effort to try to help the Carolinas recover after the storm hits. But I'll tell you, that's in the short term, that's what. But then it's all policy and substance, just as you're mentioning. This president is ready to put the full federal government into the Carolinas to make sure that the damage is minimized, plus the recovery is helpful, because that's really what counts right now.
What is your take, Doug Schoen?
Look, this is an election that is in large measure a referendum in part about Donald Trump, but largely about a Republican Congress that has gotten one substantive measure passed. And I know Sean, as a supporter of individual tax cuts across the board, given that these tax cuts are not evenly distributed, and people on both coasts, because of the elimination of the state and local tax deduction in large measure, are moving against the Republicans. So I would say,
with all due
John
respect,
McLaughlin
I'm one of the guys that get hurt. I got hurt by that tax bill.
And a lot of ordinary voters who have not had the personal and professional success you've had have been hurt too.
No,
and you know what?
It's just the
hurting
opposite.
Donald Trump.
All the talking point of the left was that everything is a tax cut for the rich. But if you come from a state like New York or California and you pay high state income taxes, which we do, that is no longer deductible. That is a function then of liberal state government taxing way more than they should, which is why they're losing population in droves. But putting it aside, if you look at these numbers about median household income in the country now has gone up for the first time in real dollars since 1999. That's because the president focused his tax cuts on the poor and middle class, and they're getting huge benefits from it, which to me makes me happy. I want the forgotten men and women of this country to get their piece of the dream.
But I think you would agree with me, Sean, that the message of the benefits of the tax cuts has not been fully articulated in a compelling way by the Republicans. So
not by the Republicans. The president does it when he's on the stump. There's no doubt about it in his rallies. But the Republican Party, it's like scattershot.
One-man party, Sean.
You can't. I agree. That's why Newt's right. You got to nationalize the elections. Now, your party has trouble, too, though. You know, Nancy Pelosi, Maxine Waters running out there saying things like they want to impeach the president.
Ocasio-Cortez.
Yeah. You know, even Jimmy Carter said that the party's making a big mistake going hard left like they are.
You know that I'm a man with increasingly less of a party because I'm one strong national defense, pro-tax cuts, pro-energy independence, but I happen to be a Democrat, Sean.
I know. I have to fix this. It's been a life's mission. I've failed.
You've been working on me for 15 years.
Yeah, it hasn't
hopefully
worked yet.
within the next 15.
But I do think there's an opportunity here. I would nationalize it based on the economy, making tax cuts permanent, making energy independence a 4-year goal of the country, creating millions of jobs. Border security is at the top of the list. If you look at the numbers, Americans want their borders secure. And I think if every Republican were to sign on to that, I think they'd win pretty easily. And that's what John's poll says.
Absolutely. And I want to unite us in one thing is like, because, Sean, during the campaign, I was providing to the president, now president, how important it was to have his tax cuts at the front of his agenda. And during the battle, I was sending them numbers that this was popular. We were the only ones in the country framing it as President Trump's tax cut, and the majority of Americans support it. And it wasn't because what they were going to put in their pockets. It was because of the pro-growth sentiment. The country is now a majority Ronald Reagan supply-side pro-growth mentality. And what's working is they see that the jobs are being created. They see their jobs are secure. They see businesses opening again. They tell us in focus groups they've seen help wanted signs that they've never seen in a decade. And so it's the pro-growth part. But I tell you one thing, what took a home run and turned it into a mere base hit was the idea that they eliminated the state and local property taxes. And I, like you, that deduction, I, like you, live in New York, although it's a much poorer suburb where I live. But I'll tell you what, if the Republicans make the statement, the leadership in Congress, if they say, you know what, we said it was going to grow the economy. It is growing the economy. We're going to restore some of that property tax and state and local property tax deductibility and either put it back totally or raise the cap. You will help save 20 to 25 Republican seats in the House. And that's what I was alluding to, Sean. John is right. Could create the majority. This is self-inflicted. Self-inflicted.
I agree with both of you. All right, well, we'll take a break. How to roll that out, and what will the Democrats do if, in fact, that happens? The Democrat plan is simple. They want to raise taxes. They want to eliminate ICE. They want to keep Obamacare. They want to impeach Trump. I don't think that's much of an agenda that the American people will like. All right, wrapping things up with our pollsters, 54 days till Election Day, Doug Schoen and John McLaughlin. We had a rare moment of agreement. What are you afraid that the Republicans will do, Doug, in the next 54 days that would win the election for them?
Yeah, that they'll have a pro-growth, inclusive agenda like you and John have been articulating, like John's poll shows, that they'll move to a message that is not just the president, but is the congressional leadership on down to the House candidates, that talks about the progress and how to continue it. We Democrats hope that the message remains incoherent, divided, polarized, et cetera, et cetera. And if that happens with our allies in the media, we could win the House, if not a few Senate seats.
I love how honest you are. With our allies in the media, which is pretty much everybody but Hannity, yeah, we'll do really well.
You want me to be honest, Sean, don't you?
No, you're honest. Of course the media slants left. It's not even it's a joke at this point for anyone to think otherwise. John?
Well, I think Doug's exactly right. And on the other hand, if the Republicans were to vote to make the tax cuts permanent and they were to raise the cap on the deductibility for state and local taxes, the Democrats on the other side, all the Democrats that have promised to repeal the Trump tax cut, what have they promised to do? Cut the child tax credit in half from $2,000 to $1,000. Cut your personal standard deduction from $2,000 to $1,000. Raise the tax rates on 90% of all Americans, the federal income tax rates. That's a great contrast for the Republicans because not only are they going to wreck the economy again, but they're going to raise your taxes and personally hurt you.
All right, I want to thank you both for being with us. 54 days to go. We'll be checking in often. John McLaughlin, Doug Schoen, the most important midterm in our lifetime. 800-941-SEAN is our number. We go back to North Carolina and Hurricane Florence about out to pound the Carolina coast, and we'll see how prepared everybody is. Looks like things are looking safe. It looks like most people are listening, and most people have left the area, and let's hope and pray that's true. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll continue. Hannity at 9 tonight on the Fox News Channel. We'll have the latest news and the latest on the hurricane.
Exposing government waste and abuse of your liberties every day. Sean Hannity is on right now.
My administration is in close coordination with state and local authorities and FEMA. These are tremendous people also, as you know, has already placed extensive resources on the ground, including search and rescue experts, power restoration, and medical support. Residents in the path of these devastating storms should comply with all evacuation orders and other emergency instructions. Protection of life is the absolute highest priority, and that's what we're doing. It's called protection of life. So God bless everybody and be careful.
All right, that was the president giving a pretty stern warning and telling us about the preparations that have been made as Hurricane Florence now makes its way to the Carolinas. Looks like a pretty direct hit going into Wilmington, North Carolina, and Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Should make its way down a little bit, then go inland. It's anticipated the storm, once it hits, is going to pretty much stall and stay there. And on top of the surging waters, you're going to have a lot of rain drop, 40 inches predicted in some areas. And joining us now is the Lieutenant Governor, Dan Forest of North Carolina. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Sean. Thanks for having me on.
Well, first, our thoughts and prayers go out to all our friends in North Carolina. I know it's not fun. People in the coastal areas, they got to pack up, take their stuff, move out, get shelter. How prepared are you at this point, do you think?
Well, the state's very well prepared. I think, we've been through this a number of times. We have one of the best emergency management teams in the country. They've been on top of this for quite a long time now, and they're prepared. The trick is, how prepared are all the people? The good news is we've seen probably record numbers of people actually packing up and leaving and heading to shelters or other places inland to get away from the storm. So that is the good news. I would say that the bad side of the news is that we're still a day away from landfall on this, and a lot of people are starting to act a little nonchalant. Maybe they seem a little disappointed. It's not a Category 4 storm slamming into our coast, but this is still an extremely powerful hurricane with lots of wind, lots of water, and as you just mentioned, storm surge. It could be record-breaking, and we could have record-breaking rainfall and flooding as well.
Well, on top of that, I mean, it still has the capability of picking up more strengths as it hits landfall. What time do you expect it to hit the coast?
Well, right now it's about 12 noon tomorrow. That's going to hit right at Wrightsville Beach, which is the most heavily populated area of our coast in that part of the state. And so you have from Figure 8 Island, Topsail, Wrightsville Beach, Carolina Beach. I mean, this goes all the way down. It's heavily populated area all the way down past Myrtle Beach. And so, we have people that are down there that are saying, hey, we're going to ride this one out. We've done it before, but, our message is, well, maybe you've ridden out some Category 2s before, but probably not with this level of storm surge and this level of flooding. And, you may be able to survive the wind and rain, but you can't survive storm surge if it's significant enough.
Well, that's the problem. I mean, I would expect they're expecting billions of dollars in property damage, and especially along the coastal area, a lot of people are going to be losing their homes.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of homes in precarious places out there already. And so, yeah, there's no doubt there's going to be a lot of homes that are lost. And then it's not just on the coast, Sean. You take this flooding. Obviously, you know how the lay of the land in North Carolina. We have a lot of rivers and tributaries. We have areas like Lumberton and Fayetteville that are still recovering from Matthew 2 years ago, haven't been fully rebuilt yet. And that's flooding is going to happen again. You're going to see flooding all the way across our state. Rain's going to sweep through South Carolina, turn north, go into the mountains. Those mountain streams and rivers rivers are going to fill up. They're going to head back down to the coast again. That water is still going to be at a high level. And so somewhere in the mid part of our state, the places around Kinston and those areas that have flooded many times before are going to flood again. So this is going to be a long-term process that we're going to be going through in North Carolina, and a long-term recovery, obviously.
Well, you know, that the one person that's complicit with this, if you read the Washington Post, Donald Trump is complicit with the formation of the storm. Obviously, you get some lunatic theories and conspiracy theories. What about pre-positioning needed food, water, medicine, cots, blankets, baby formula, supplies? Has all of that been pre-positioned for those that will be in need?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, already our shelters are open. I was just visiting a shelter here in Raleigh just a couple hours ago. Unbelievably well run, amazingly taken care of. The people are happy. It's filled. That one's filled with about 300 and something people. They're expecting a lot more. Even after the storm starts, people calling into the EMS folks and saying, "Hey, come get me. My power went out. I'm scared." And we expect those shelters continue to be filled up, and they're extremely well run. I'm very pleased with what's going on there. On the flip side of that, obviously FEMA's ready. They're stationed down close to the coast, and they're going to jump into action, as well as our emergency management team. And then groups like Samaritan's Purse, who I know you know very well, Franklin Graham and his team, they're ready to sweep into action, as well as the Baptist men that come from all over the Southeast to help out. And groups like that will be there as well. So, you know, our charge right now is to protect people, protect lives along the coast, make sure that people aren't unduly taking lives in their own hands here, and making sure that they're not putting our first responders at risk. But on the backside saying, hey, we need help. We're going to need a lot of help from across the country. Go to places like spvolunteer.org for Samaritan's Purse and sign up. They're collecting people right now to sweep in here and help.
All right, listen, Lieutenant Governor, you're in our thoughts and prayers. Our friends in North Carolina, South Carolina, some in Georgia and Virginia, we're watching very closely. We do live in a very generous country. Whatever needs come up as a result of this storm, if people just get out with their lives, there's going to be a lot of help on the other side. You mentioned Samaritan's Purse and Franklin Graham, and the Red Cross and others are going to be doing their thing, and the American people will do what they usually do, and that's step up and generously donate, I'm sure. We wish you the best. Hang in there, batten down the hatches, and hopefully we won't have any loss of life in this.
Thank you, Sean. Appreciate it. You have a great day.
All right, my friend, thank you. 800-941-SEAN if you want to be a part of this extravaganza. We're going to get to our phones now. Let's say hi to Sue Ray. Well, she's in Greensboro in North Carolina. Sue Ray, hi, how are you? I hope you're ready for this extravaganza that's headed your way.
Well, I'm not so sure I'm ready, but we're going to have to be. I just love listening to your show. I want you to know that since Fox News has started, I have watched you from the.
I appreciate it. I know my hair's getting a little grayer, you know. I'm getting a little, not as young as I used to be.
Hey, that just makes you look a little bit more better. You look a little distinguished there.
Exactly. That's what I say. I'm looking a little distinguished. You know, people actually will come up to you. Well, why don't you use like Just for Men? And I'm like looking at you, and I'm like, why? You don't like my hair?
You look good. Yeah. Hey, you look good. And my kids, whenever they were little, and it used to be you and Alan Combs, they used to say, "Boy, Sean's really nice looking, but that other guy, I'm not so sure about him." Well, he's a Democrat.
Alan's a great guy. Listen, we had a number of great years together. I miss him. He's now in the other world arguing with everybody else that's in heaven.
I remember the dog being on there, and you told him that dog would bite a Democrat.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. We had some great times together.
Yeah, but no, I had seen where they were, like I said, the New York Times about Trump being complicit about this hurricane coming, and I mean, really. Give me a break. The media, I think, will do anything to try to embarrass themselves. That's just what they're doing. And
yeah, look, I mean, it just shows you a level. I mean, the two big losers of the week of the Washington Post. Well, they're a double loser because they printed Joe Scarborough's idiotic piece also. But I honestly am convinced that this is not hyperbole on my part. If Donald Trump gave every American $1 million and he cured cancer, they'd still hate him. There's the fact that he takes on the entire infrastructure, which is the swamp, and he's breaking a lot of glasses and exposing a lot of corruption, and he doesn't do things the good old boy way, and he's a little rough and tumble in how he takes all of them on. They can't stand him. Forget the results. The results have been phenomenal. They're not arguing about results, although Obama would like to take credit for something that he didn't do. But the results are phenomenal. It's great for the American people. But that's not enough for them. They still want power. It's all about power. All has been about power. There's a lot at stake in 54 days.
Your show, and that's where I know that I'm getting the right information. You can't listen to anybody. I mean, I like listening to Fox News and some of the other people, but your show, I watch it every single night, and I listen to your show on the radio, and I know that whenever I listen to you, you're thinking exactly like I'm thinking. When President Trump, then before when he first came down that escalator to say he was going to run for president, I knew then, and I said, that man's going to be our president.
A lot of people didn't think he had a chance, and they mocked him, they laughed at him, and he beat them all. And on top of that, look, let's say you don't like his fiery, combative, in-your-face style, and you want a more establishment head of state. He's never going to change. But, for all the fighting that he does against other people, remember, when he fights for us, he's winning for us, too. Anyway, I appreciate your call. You batten down the hatches. Hang in there. We're on the other side here. Americans will step up. Samaritan's Purse, and there are other groups. The American Red Cross will be there to help people. Hang in there. It's not going to be fun. If you have to evacuate, I know it's a pain, but I'd urge you to do it. Andy is in Maryland next. Andy, hi. How are you? We're glad you called.
Sean, how you doing?
Yes, sir.
Your hair looks great. Love your hair.
Right now it looks even better because I got a baseball cap on.
I think Donald Trump's going to do everything he can to make sure everything is fine, and the fake news eyeballs are going to be all over him trying to find something.
Yeah, it's even bigger than that. They've already prepared. Look, they've already pre-positioned all the food, water supplies that they're going to need, and there's been really good coordination with the states on this. So I think it's going to be fine. It's just inconvenient for people, and when people go back and they find their home has been destroyed, it's heartbreaking for them. But you got to get out with your life first.
Well, this Jeff Sessions here. I was thinking about. Would Joe DeGenevo be a good replacement for him? I mean, he knows all the players. He knows what all the crimes are going on. He knows the law. What's your opinion on that?
I love Joe DeGenevo. Joe is one of the brightest, smartest, most ethical people I've ever met. He's combative. He's tough, but he also understands that, especially when you're dealing with people's lives, that there is something called prosecutorial discretion. I don't think he's looking to put people in jail just for the sake of putting them in jail. And there's got to be a real reason to it. There's got to be real evidence and real proof, and you got to get the evidence the right way. And
I think the real criminals need to go to jail.
I think there's going to be a lot of people that have a lot of legal problems moving forward. This week has been so blockbuster that I got to tell you, I see this now coming. It is their whole house of cards has come tumbling down, and they've been hoping that it'll all go away after the election. If the Democrats win the House, all those investigations will end. I don't see that happening. I think before then, we're going to know very well just how corrupt they were before the election, after the election, who all the players involved were, and how they set out to destroy one candidate, save another candidate, and then destroy the winning candidate. I think that all is true, and all the evidence points to that direction.
Let's face it, most people here are pretty upset and pretty sad because of the election.
That was the first moment I really felt like we were going to lose. And it was this massive, kick in the gut that we were going to lose. And it was really painful.
We'll be very strong and vocal and, not just, from a press standpoint or a PR standpoint, but actually working hard behind the scenes to stand up for what's right.
I think it's worth being very vigilant and thinking about all these issues. What can we do to lead to maybe a better quality of governance, decision-making, and so forth?
Is there anything positive you see from this election result?
Boy, that's a really tough one right now.
All right, there it is. Just after the election of Donald Trump, there are Google executives, and they are just besides themselves that Donald Trump had won and that they lost, and they can't believe it. Also allegations that, in fact, in the lead up to the campaign, that they were doing their own outreach, which could be, if under the right circumstances, a type of campaign finance violation if they're offering in-kind donations for their point of view. Now, there is an argument to be made that anybody should have free speech no matter how powerful their platform happens to be. But to the extent that 90+% of the people that run these tech companies slant solidly to the left, well, that shouldn't surprise anybody. Jonathan Gilliam is the author of Sheep No More. Danielle McLaughlin is author, constitutional attorney, and welcome both of you to the program.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Does it matter legally if you have big tech companies that impact hundreds of millions of people's lives every single day with an agenda, and they work that agenda through their algorithms and the way they monitor people?
Hey, Sean, I'm not sure legally speaking whether there's any election law infraction, but I do think that we all trust these technology companies to give us results that are unbiased. They have First Amendment views like all corporations. We would hope that they wouldn't insert their own biases into our search results or anything along those lines. The last thing I'll say is, as it relates to the Google executives, I just saw them as responding as human beings, as people who probably did vote for Clinton, who were probably disappointed.
Yeah, the whole idea that if you go and use Google, and we've been through this recently, and they then make profiles of every single person that uses their services, you think it's a free service, it's not a free service, and then they end up taking all of your information, all the accounts, and then they begin to process and start thinking about the type of personality you are and the types of things you might look for or search for and the types of things you might want to buy. And now all of a sudden all that information keeps flowing into your life and your email, and it's not by accident. It's because they're selling that information about you just because you use their services, Jonathan.
Sean, what you just laid out, if you add to that, instead of saying just selling all that information, they're compiling that information. I listened to that entire meeting that they had, their TGIF meeting that they had, and it was the oddest thing that I've heard in a long time of how gut-wrenchingly hurt these people were, and how out of touch they were with the message that Donald Trump had the entire time he was running. And in fact, one of the women that was there is a huge Hillary Clinton supporter. She's the one that actually said it. And it just, Sean, there has to be a correlation between Twitter, between Facebook, between Amazon and the Washington Post and the New York Times, CNN, MSNBC, and these individuals and the way that they compile their information and then use that information for their political aim. There's no doubt that it's not just about collecting information and selling it. From an investigative standpoint, I have to say that people that are this passionate about a political movement and this intertwined, we're talking about people who are related, who work for the campaigns or work for Obama, and they also work in the media or in these different industries. I have no doubt that if we had the ability to look at what they were doing with this information, it's not just selling it. They're compiling it and using it for political maneuvering to the point and extent that conservatives could never do because they don't have a handle on these large tech and media companies.
I don't know. Danielle, where's the civil libertarian side of your party? Because I would think, isn't that the party that's supposed to believe in personal privacy rights, but yet they, without your knowledge and consent, take all your information and then start hitting you with ads to I guess no service is for free, but I don't remember ever signing up and saying, okay, yeah, please send me all these ads. Please create some type of a profile of me, and I want you to figure out what type of car I'd like, what type of food I'd like, etc.
Right. I think this presents a real problem for civil libertarians of all stripes. So on the one hand, we all want privacy, right? But civil libertarians also want small government. They don't want a lot of regulation. Your point about nothing being free is so true. You think about Twitter, you think about Google. They're collecting information on us every time with every single keystroke. There have been sort of considerations that maybe we should treat Facebook and Twitter like a publisher, which would mean, for example, election ads. They would have to demonstrate by law who was paying for those ads. But even if they were publishers, because we don't have a required neutrality anymore, which is why we have, MSNBC on one end and Fox News on the other, they wouldn't be required, I don't think, under any kind of publishing laws to have any kind of non-bias or to be required to get rid of any of their bias. It's a tricky problem. My biggest worry is the fact that they're collecting all this information and there's not much we can do about it.
Let me ask this. Do you believe, as the Washington Post stated, that Donald Trump, that, quote, another hurricane is about to batter our coast and that Donald Trump is complicit?
A damning Washington Post editorial is calling President Trump, quote, complicit in this storm, not for failing to prepare, but for failing to address climate change. So senior political analyst John Avlon has more for us. What do you see, John?
That's right, Allie. And in 2012, North Carolina lawmakers passed a bill explicitly ignoring climate science.
No. And the weather, no, I don't believe that.
The article goes on to say when it comes to extreme weather, Mr. Trump is complicit. He plays down humans' roles in increasing the risks, and he continues to dismantle efforts to address these real risks. So he's complicit. The hurricane, the dog bites, the bee stings, you're feeling sad. It's all Trump's fault.
Well, I think here's the thing, right? I know that there's a very strong debate going on about the cause of global warming. We have seen the ocean temperatures rise over the last 100 years, starting in the late 19th century, which correlates with...
Time magazine said in the 70s that we were having a new ice age coming.
Yeah, I mean, these lines aren't linear, right? So you see ups and downs, but the general trend is upward.
Well, what is it? Are we having global warming, global cooling, or a new ice age? Or maybe you guys don't know, but for political reasons, there's an economic agenda behind it.
Well, I certainly think there's an economic agenda against denying climate change, especially if you're an oil company or a coal company or some kind of a company.
Can you ever name a time when the climate hasn't changed? The climate has never been one static temperature anywhere, has it?
We do know that
some summers are hotter than others, some are cooler than others, right? Some winters are more severe than others.
But the trend is upwards, and I think that's where we get caught between weather and the trend in climate. And there's no question that when you have warmer water, hurricanes are more intense. That's what happened in 2015.
So are you saying that Trump is complicit with Hurricane Florence?
No, I'm not. I'm not going to go there because I think that's ridiculous. And if we're trying to have a reasonable conversation about this, saying he's complicit in the hurricane is nonsense.
Well, how do you have a reasonable conversation if the Washington Post starts out with Trump is complicit?
Well, you and I seem to be having a reasonable conversation, and I'm going to disavow them saying that.
It's the first time I think you've ever said that, Jonathan.
I'm impressed, listen, here Danielle's right about one thing. We are having a good conversation. That's what we do here every Thursday when we come on here with you. We have a good conversation. And I have to go back to what I was saying there a second ago, Sean, because it doesn't matter if we're talking about climate change, if we're talking about whether or not President Trump is doing the right thing or not, or whether we're talking about election results. The left, and I'm talking about the far left, I'm not talking about the Danielles and the Rick Ungers that are liberal. I'm talking about the far left people who are radicals in this country that are running companies. They can put out stories, and they will coordinate these stories across these lines, and then they can march with this. There's one of the things that one of the executives in that Google video continued to say was how closely they monitor the information that's coming in. And he started talking about how people that were depressed were responsible for Nazis and fascism and all these things. But he looks at the information that's coming in, and they can tell if a story is making a difference upon their voters and the people that click and watch these things. That, to me, is horrifying because...
I want to stay focused on the Democrats. And very specifically, I want to know if their rhetoric goes over the top. I mean, you had this Republican candidate that was nearly stabbed to death over the weekend in San Francisco. Why? Because he is a Republican. You got Democrats blaming Trump for the hurricane. The liberal media is blaming him. Oh, he's complicit in the hurricane. You got some crazy Trump-hating professor shooting himself to protest the president. You look at the names and the things that are being said by the Democrats. What do they want? What are they running on? They're running on hating Trump, impeaching Trump, taking taxes, raising them, getting their crumbs back, eliminating ICE, open borders, keeping Obamacare, none of which has worked. The reason things have turned around for the economy so dramatically is because of the policies of Donald Trump. Conservative policies, tax cuts, deregulation works. Every time it's been tried, it's proven to be successful. Why do we always go backwards?
Look, we've got two parties, so this is a pendulum. As for the rhetoric, there is no question that this is something that both sides do. I mean, even today, the president was blaming Democrats for the numbers of death, the death numbers in Puerto Rico. I mean, sure, the Washington Post went a bit crazy when it blamed Trump for the hurricane and called him complicit. But the idea that somehow Democrats are to blame for the death toll in Puerto Rico, it's nonsense. It's totally nonsense.
I don't know who's blaming Democrats. It was a terrible tragedy in Puerto Rico. And I tried to, like many Americans, my buddy Geraldo had a fund. We tried to help people out. Billions and billions of dollars were respent. I mean, you had zero infrastructure. It was all knocked out. And at that point, it's a natural disaster. And you do everything you can do to help, your fellow citizens out, your fellow people that are in need. And we stepped up with billions and billions of dollars. We've rebuilt the entire electrical grid. We've spent billions of dollars rebuilding homes. You can't bring back human life and the loss of human life. It is a tragedy. And it's not about numbers. A lot of people died. And I think we've done a pretty good job showing the people of Puerto Rico that we mean business by sending all of that money over there and all of those resources over there.
No, I agree that one thing that is always incredible to see, regardless of state, local, or federal government response, is what ordinary Americans do for one another. And Jonathan, I don't think you'll disagree with that.
Well, he agrees. All right, we got to take a break. All right, at the bottom of the hour, Joe Concha is going to weigh in on the Democratic Party and their repeated meltdowns, the anger and fits that they're throwing every day. But final thoughts as we continue with Danielle McLaughlin and Jonathan Gillum. Jonathan, I think now as we head into this election, you got 54 days. I think that what we discussed with our pollster friends is dead on accurate. Republicans have got to promise specific things they're going to do that will advance the Trump agenda further and stop the Democratic agenda of impeachment and Obamacare and open borders and higher taxes.
Yeah, and I would even press people that are centric to the left to realize what's going on with the misinformation and all the stuff that's going on. I watched on MSNBC. I was flipping channels yesterday. I got to see Ben Sasse on with Jake Tapper yesterday. That was a joke. I watched MSNBC for a little while. They can't go more than 10 seconds without saying the word Trump. And they talk about, and they use words that these are news programs where they're using terms like he's insane, about a White House that's in shambles. And that none of that is true. It's just that's the reporting. That's the misinformation. And it's people have to realize that there's statistics they can look at and follow what the president has done. And they can also look at the statistics of what the Democrat Party has done and realize that there are socialists that are getting elected. There are people that are backed by communist parties that are elected right now in the Democrat Party. And that should scare people. I don't care if you're liberal or conservative. It should scare you. And any party that's involved in that, you should flee from it. And maybe, you're liberal and you don't like some of the things that the Republican Party does. I don't either. But I don't see the communists and socialists fleeing to the Republican Party. Maybe we need to work on and fix the Republican Party. I get it.
I think Americans, it's a choice election. You just got to make sure the American people know what the choices are. And that's what we should be debating for 54 days. Thank you both for being with us. When we come back, who is anonymous and how dangerous is it? And what does it mean? Well, when he leaves one way or another, was that an implicit threat of some kind? Joe Concha joins us, and your calls, 800-941-SEAN is our number. We'll continue.
The swamp. One corrupt politician at a time. This is the Sean Hannity Show.
All right, 25 now till the top of the hour, 800-941-SEAN, toll-free telephone number. Our buddy Joe Concha has a piece in The Hill today, and the headline is CNN's Avalon on Trump complicity for Florence, policies tearing down our defenses to climate change. Is President Trump complicit in this storm? And he quotes a CNN fake news anchor introducing a segment while citing a Washington Post story that I had mentioned earlier in the program today. They actually said in the Washington Post, another hurricane is about to batter our coast and Trump is complicit. When it comes to extreme weather, Mr. Trump is complicit. He plays down humans' role in increasing the risks. He continues to dismantle efforts to address those risks. You understand what it means to be complicit in a hurricane being formed off the Atlantic? And this is how off the rails and unhinged some of these people on the left have become. Anyway, then the anchor gets an answer. His policies have been tearing down our defenses to climate change, which is often a blame for extreme weather. Anyway, and on the same day that Trump was discussing Florence, his EPA proposed rolling back restrictions on emissions of methane. That's just the latest environmental policy targeted by the Trump administration. And they cite two Harvard scientists that claim that 80,000 unnecessary deaths could take place every decade.
A damning Washington Post editorial is calling President Trump, quote, complicit in this storm, not for failing to prepare, but for failing to address climate change. So senior political analyst John Avlon has more for us. What do you see, John?
That's right, Allie. Look, President Trump has been reaching for storm superlatives, as he is wont to do. The biggest, the worst, the most dangerous, and who can forget, tremendously wet. But while President Trump has been talking up our preparedness, his policies have been tearing down our defenses to climate change, which is often blamed for extreme weather. In fact, on the very same day Trump was discussing Florence from the Oval Office, his EPA proposed rolling back restrictions on emissions of methane.
Joe Concha, is Donald Trump complicit with the hurricane? Because we've had hurricanes that go back, hundreds of years.
Yeah. If President Trump didn't pull out of the Paris Climate Accord and the EPA wasn't rolling back these restrictions, here's the only question you have to ask. If you want to make a pragmatic argument, not a partisan argument, would this hurricane still be hitting the Carolinas right now? In other words, John Avlon, who I've written columns for before when he was back at the Daily Beast, I know John, I've done segments with him before, he says his policies have been tearing down our defenses to climate change. This isn't the 85 Bears where you put up a defense and you could stop a storm from coming, right? So I just don't understand how we had. No, I understand, actually. I'm not going to act like I'm going to play dumb here. But when the Washington Post writes a column like that, it's not like it came from some guy who wrote a column. It was their editorial board who made the argument that President Trump is complicit. How could you make that argument, possibly, when, as you said, hurricanes have been happening for hundreds of years, and even if you don't roll back these EPA regulations, and even if President Trump talks about climate change, these people in the Carolinas are going to suffer regardless of what happens. It is the most irresponsible thing I've seen written in, I don't know, at least 24 hours, Sean.
At least 24 hours. That's a pretty a long period of time. It just so happens the American Enterprise Institute, AEI.org, they pointed out in President Trump's first year in office, the U.S. reduced CO2 emissions more than any other country in the world. I know that there's, right? Well, look, every election year, every 2 years, every 4 years, and I've got all the tapes. I play them often. Democrats have one playbook and they never deviate at all. It's all the same thing. And they'll roll out one of these crazy conspiracy theories a day, and saying that the president's complicit with the formation of Hurricane Florence pretty much takes the cake. But the narrative goes like this, that Republicans are racist, that Republicans are sexist, misogynist. Republicans are xenophobic. They're homophobic. They're Islamophobic. As it relates to the environment, they want dirty air and water, the same water that others drink, the same air that people breathe, that they want children to die, and they want to throw Granny over the cliff because they don't want to increase the projected increases in Medicare. It happens every 2 and 4 years in some form. And reality is we're 54 days out of an election. The other thing that I see that's actually humorous is, there's people talking about this being Katrina and nothing's happened yet. The hurricane hasn't even hit landfall. Now, from every source I have, the government under Donald Trump has been in complete contact with every governor, every local mayor. They have pre-positioned food, water, medicine, supplies, baby formula, blankets and cots, and all the necessary items that they think they're going to need. And they're ready to roll those trucks into those towns that most need it. And then I'm sure the government's going to come in and declare it a disaster area. And then people are going to get monies, either loans or grants, and they're going to rebuild their homes.
People don't talk about very much, Sean, right? Texas and Florida, the big hurricanes that hit Houston and Florida last year, right? And the response was great. I mean, it really is as good as it gets. I mean, Brock Long, who runs FEMA, did a phenomenal job. Then people point to Puerto Rico. Now, the thing about Puerto Rico, and the president is exactly right about this, when you're on an island and you have no access by roads and the electric grid was already shot, I don't know what president, what FEMA, what government could have done any better than what our government did. Now, I don't know a lot about, hurricane recovery and everything like that, but I'm just using logic here, pragmatism again. How do we do such a perfect job or a great job in Houston and in the parts of Texas there along the Gulf Coast and then Florida, and everybody says, even though they don't want to, that the president and FEMA did a great job, and then suddenly in Puerto Rico, everybody forgot how to do their job. No, it was a very unique situation, a situation like we've never seen before.
It was horrible, and it got hit by two hurricanes, Irma and Maria. The electrical grid was already dilapidated, outdated, and shot, and it literally, nobody had power immediately. There was zero. There was no electricity, no water, no telecommunications, zero transportation. I don't know how many people died, but way too many. It was a horrible convergence of circumstances. But with that said, today electricity is flowing, the water systems are operating, traffic is now moving, airports, seaports are back up. And permanent reconstruction has already begun. The amount of money that is spent is extraordinarily high, if money means anything, but, $1.39 billion federal grants to homeowners, $1.8 billion low interest loans for small businesses, $21 million national flood insurance program claims, $7.9 million for survivors that lost work in the process of all of this, $100 million for more than 7,000 households for transitional sheltering assistance. And I can go on about the millions and billions of dollars, but the amount of money was staggering. And I know that doesn't, you can't stop a hurricane with money, but at least we're showing that we care enough to rebuild. And we've done so in many ways successfully, but you would think that it was the worst response ever and that nobody cared. That's not true.
Right. And look, I don't think the president should be broaching, questioning the death toll, whether it is lower or higher, depending on who was killed by the hurricane and who was killed by natural cause. I think you just get into the weeds.
Let's just say one is too many. That's how I look at it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, that's what I would have done. And look, we could criticize this president, right? Like, I mean, I'm sure you don't agree with everything he's done. Maybe you don't like what he's done with tariffs, or maybe you don't like what he's done in terms of foreign policy, or maybe tax cuts haven't gone far enough. Whatever. That's all fair game. I have no problem with that. But when we go down this road where we start blaming him for hurricanes, that's when people look at the media and say, not only do I not trust him, I don't think I'm ever going to trust him again. And by the way, the Paris Climate Accord, that people say, well, if we just stayed in it, then maybe we could prevent these things from happening in the future. People forget, if China and India are not on board, they amount for 37% of the world's population. If only we're going all in and we're paying for it, and we only account for 15% of the population, it's not going to make a lick of difference anyway. So until you get a fair agreement, we had every right to pull out. So that's what's driving me crazy here, Sean. I mean, our media always overplays hand every time. Every time. And Gallup had a poll that came out this week that shows that 90% of Republicans don't trust the media. And I don't know if you've ever been cheated on in a relationship before, but once you lose that trust, it's hard to put that toothpaste back in the tube. Those people aren't coming back, and we're forever going to be fractured. You're going to have half the country not knowing where to get their truth from, except for a couple of outlets.
Well, any girl that dated me back in the day would cheat on me just because it's me. Who cares?
You didn't know karate, though, then. I mean, that was a turn-on. I mean, Michael LaRusso did very well in Karate Kid once he learned how to beat the Cobra Kai. I'm just saying.
Joe Concha was the stud. I mean, he had a new girlfriend every week. It was amazing. Although I didn't know you then. I have no idea if it's true.
I had a little skin problem way back when. That's not entirely true.
Oh,
but I made up for it in my 20s.
Oh, no.
We've gone sideways, haven't we?
So you got the Washington Post, but it goes further than that. You heard about this case out in San Francisco where this Trump hater, Republican hater, attempted an assassination with the switchblade of a Republican congressional candidate. You got another Trump hater shooting himself to protest the president. I mean, I don't think you can get any dumber than that, but that's going on. Listen, Breitbart had a while ago put up 564 reports and threats against Trump supporters just for wearing like Trump hats. And it's gotten really, really violent in the rhetoric. We watch what happened with Sarah Huckabee Sanders. We watch what happened with Secretary Nielsen. And we watch what happened with Pam Bondi. We've heard the vitriol directed at the First Lady repeatedly, and even attacks against the 12-year-old kid, the president's son. I don't think that a conservative would ever get away with the type of personal attacks against women and the family the way the mainstream media does now on a regular basis. This is ABC News. This is The View doing it. This is, cable television. I don't think there's any such thing as unbiased cable television anymore. They all have an opinion.
Oh, God, yeah, because I think I have a theory on this. I want to get your opinion on it. I think a lot of hosts check and I've seen this because I've been on like every set on every cable network. They'll check their Twitter feed the minute a segment's over so they can gauge reaction, because a lot of people in this business are very insecure and they need to get confirmation that, yay, I did a good job. And if they go against the grain of what their audience doesn't want to hear, then they get hit pretty good on Twitter. Like immediately they're getting
Well, you'll be proud to know that I don't have Twitter on my phone anymore. I don't use it. My staff uses it for me.
Yeah, don't
you miss my old Twitter fights though? I had some classics.
You?
Yeah.
You got involved with some things that I think probably took up a lot of your time and weren't worth
it. Took up way too much of my time, and that's the thing. I began to realize this is a job now. But I did enjoy taking on a lot of people. I mean. And I felt like I was good at it. See, one of the differences between me and some of my cohorts in this business is that I'm a talk show host. I admit who I am. They're not honest about who they are. They claim to be fair and balanced. And being a talk show host, it includes a variety of different jobs included under one banner. Some nights I'm an objective journalist. Some nights I'm doing straight news. When I do hurricane coverage, it's going to be straight news coverage. I'm not going to be politicizing the hurricane. Just giving information and facts, hopefully that is helpful to people that are viewing. Other nights I give strong opinion. Other nights I'll let other people debate. It's all part of being a talk show host. We do investigative reporting. I think we've broken more news on Hannity in the last 2 years than all the other cable channels combined. So
you're like a newspaper, basically. You open
we're
up,
the
you get
whole
hard
newspaper,
section,
but they're
you get
supposed to be
opinion.
just the news part. We do news, we do opinion, we do editorials, we even do sports. Colin Kaepernick.
Yeah, the cultural stuff anyway, right? So, yeah, and so as long as you admit that, then people will accept it. That's fine. But, if you go to CNN, right, and Don Lemon is still called an anchor, and Anderson Cooper's still called an anchor, and Chris Cuomo's still called an anchor. No, they're not an anchor. You're hosts. You're giving opinions. It's okay.
but part of being a host can
when you're
as a host, though, Joe, you can break news, objectively break news. As a host, I use sources. I break news. I give the news straight up to people. Other times I'm giving opinions. It's a combination.
They're called anchors. They're still being called anchors.
They're not.
And anchors are different. Maybe no one cares about the title anymore, but I still do. And I think if you're an anchor, therefore
they make a big deal when they say Hannity's not a reporter, and I say I'm not a reporter, but I am a talk show host, and part of being a talk show host is being a reporter.
And you do a lot of it, don't you? 4 hours. Don't you ever get tired? I mean, that's
I don't.
Fatiguing.
I don't.
What do you take, the 5-hour energy? You go the Red Bull?
No, I don't.
What's the secret?
No, I do about an hour and a half worth of Ninja every day. That keeps me alive.
Good Lord, I can't do. I got a mean set of nunchucks, though. I got to say, I just go.
All right, bring them in.
Go right to the weapons.
You know what? We do a lot of training, weapons training. We do blade, stick, firearm training. We do it all. So come by one day and work out with us.
Hey, speaking of blades, by the way, that switchblade attack that happened against the person running against
San Francisco
in California, ABC, CBS, and NBC did not cover it one bit. And all I ask for your audience to imagine is, what if a Trump supporter, he said, went after any Democrat running for office wearing a red "Make America Great Again" hat, and it
wouldn't work out well.
Wall-to-wall coverage. So I just don't get it. I mean, that's a story. Don't worry about whether it was a Republican or Democrat. Somebody attacks a candidate, it's a story. How do you not cover that?
Well said. All right, Joe Concha with The Hill. Thank you, sir. 800-941-SEAN, toll-free telephone number. We'll have full coverage of the hurricane and all the breaking news as well, 9 Eastern on Fox. All right, Hannity tonight, 9 Eastern on Fox. Obviously, we'll be covering all of the latest developments surrounding Hurricane Florence and hitting the Carolinas, and we have reporters on the ground. And we'll bring you all the events as they happen. We also have Joe Bastardi. We do have news with Greg and Sarah and Joe DeGeneva and Tom Fitton. We'll get all that in as well throughout the full hour. It's a breaking news hour. Tonight, Hannity, 9 Eastern on Fox News. We got it all covered. We'll see you tonight at 9. Back here tomorrow. Thanks for being with us.